All right, let's dive right into this explainer and discover how a supposed dark age was actually a vibrant 1,000-year crucible that entirely forged the modern mind. We often grow up with this assumption that the Middle Ages were just a massive historical pause button, literally centuries of plague, mud, and total intellectual stagnation. But as we start to unpack the actual historical shifts, we find out that this era was a period of intense, underlying friction that completely rewired how humanity understands itself. So far from being dark, it was absolutely the essential, messy groundwork for the modern era.
We're going to be grounding our entire journey today in Hegel's Lectures on the History of Philosophy, Volume 3. It's a dense read, for sure, but what's really fascinating as we explore it together is exactly how he views history. He doesn't see it as just a random sequence of events or chaotic accidents. Instead, he maps out the deliberate, evolving march of human thought. We literally get to watch the human mind wrestle with itself to figure out reality over the course of centuries. Here is our roadmap for this dialectical journey: a 1,000-year leap, the Christian Revolution, the Arabian Bridge, the Scholastic Crucible, and finally, reconciling two worlds. Starting us off, Part 1, a 1,000-year leap. Okay, let's get a sense of the sheer scale of the timeline we're dealing with here. Hegel says we must put on 7-leagued boots to cross this colossal 1,000-year gap. The first great period of philosophy begins way back around 550 BC with Thales. But notice what happens around the 5th and 6th centuries AD. The death of Proclus in 485 and the official disappearance of pagan philosophy by 529 AD mark a monumental, absolute hard stop. This year, 529, is when Emperor Justinian famously closed the academy in Athens. It wasn't just the closing of a school, it was the total shutting down of an entire ancient worldview. From that exact moment, the human mind takes a dramatic pivot away from the physical, natural world and enters an entirely new, unseen sphere for the next millennium. Moving to Part 2, the Christian Revolution. This brings us to a radical antithesis, a complete shift from looking outward at external nature to looking deeply inward at the spirit. Think about how the ancient worldview embodied by the Greek gods was essentially anthropomorphic. Those gods were tied to natural forms, immediate qualities, and very human flaws. They were just out there in the physical world. Contrast that with the new Christian concept that arrives. It presents an absolute, concrete unity of the divine and the human in the form of the Word made flesh. It wasn't just a god sitting casually on a mountain or throwing lightning bolts. It was the absolute becoming actual, present, living spirit. It's an entirely different way of conceptualizing truth itself. So the crucial point here is that to attain this profound new truth, humanity had to completely renounce its immediate natural existence and embrace a really painful spiritual rebirth. I mean, think about how difficult it is in our own personal lives to unlearn old, comfortable habits just to reach a new level of understanding. Now imagine an entire civilization having to do that. Because external nature was no longer seen as inherently perfect or divine, man had to overcome his base natural self. This renunciation, this deeply uncomfortable giving up of the natural will, mirrors the core narrative of sacrifice. For the thinkers of this era, walking through that psychological fire became the absolute prerequisite for achieving true spiritual freedom. Which brings us to Part 3, the Arabian Bridge. While the West fell into geopolitical chaos and what we might call barbarian rule, the lifeblood of philosophy had to find a new path forward, and what unfolds is a fragile, almost miraculous chain of custody that preserved the genius of ancient thinkers for centuries. It's literally an intellectual relay race. The original Greek texts were first saved by Syrian translators in Western Asia. From there, they passed into the thriving Islamic world, where they were meticulously translated into Arabic and deeply studied by incredible scholars. Eventually, this wealth of preserved knowledge made its way into Western Europe, translated once again into Latin. It's pretty amazing to consider that without this vast geographical and cultural bridge, the very foundations of modern Western thought might have vanished entirely in the dust of the collapsed Roman Empire. And as this philosophy blended with Islamic theology, you get some truly surreal, abstract logic, particularly from the Arabian Madavarim. They believed reality wasn't a continuous flow of cause and effect at all, but was actually recreated frame by divine will. To defend their theology, they argued that existence is basically just atoms in empty space, and qualities are actively destroyed and recreated by God every single second. Since there are no natural laws or necessary connections holding things together, they reached the logically sound, yet totally absurd conclusion that it's perfectly possible for a flea to suddenly be as large as an elephant. It is a wildly imaginative, almost cinematic dissolution of reality, completely upending how we think about the strict laws of physics today.
Next up, Part 4, the Scholastic Crucible.
Meanwhile, the West was slowly beginning to awaken from its political fragmentation and started building its own rigorous intellectual frameworks. This takes us into the very heart of the Middle Ages, and it is essential to understand that this era wasn't just characterized by blind, unquestioning faith. It birthed scholasticism, a rigid, formal endeavor of Christendom spanning nearly a millennium, driven by the scholastics, the instructors in monasteries and cathedrals. They took the newly rediscovered razor-sharp logic of Aristotle, saved by that Arabian bridge we just talked about, and applied it directly to the deepest mysteries of their religion. This was a radical, almost dangerous idea at the time, attempting to map out the infinite spiritual world with absolute mathematical precision.
Anselm's powerful words perfectly encapsulate this mission. I mean, ask yourself, how often today do we casually assume that faith and logic are total opposites? And some of the scholastics believed the exact reverse. They didn't view faith as an excuse to stop thinking. They believed possessing faith demanded the absolute highest possible level of intellectual rigor. It wasn't nearly enough to just feel the truth in your heart. You were obligated to mathematically and logically deduce it in your mind.
Now, though it resulted in thousands of incredibly dense, sometimes tedious pages of formal dialectic published over centuries, this painstaking process forced human thought to organize itself. Yes, they spent lifetimes arguing over abstract minutiae that might seem entirely irrelevant to us right now, but this relentless daily mental gymnastics was absolutely crucial. It served as the ultimate training ground for the human intellect. By obsessing over logical structures and demanding airtight proofs for spiritual concepts, they were essentially building the exact mental machinery that would eventually power the scientific revolution centuries later. They literally sharpened the blade of reason. And finally, Part 5, reconciling two worlds. Ultimately, this whole era is defined by a massive, violent collision of realities. The mind had been trained, sure, but the actual lived world was deeply fractured into two separate kingdoms. You have the spiritual kingdom of the church and papacy, which demanded profound inwardness, renunciation, and heavenly truth. But existing right alongside that was the worldly kingdom of emperors and kings, entirely defined by temporal existence, violent passions, and raw, brutal power. Hegel points out that because these two realities were completely estranged, individuals were just torn apart. You had bizarre historical contradictions, like the Crusaders, who would wildly oscillate between extreme spiritual penance and raw physical slaughter. The medieval mind was practically split in half, trying to serve two completely incompatible realities. Yet from this terrible friction in purgatory, a magnificent synthesis finally occurs. The human mind actually learned to bring the lofty, abstract spiritual ideal down into actual rational laws and institutions. This definitely didn't happen overnight. It took hundreds of years of battling between the abstract heavens and the brutal, unforgiving earth. But eventually, mankind stopped viewing truth purely as an external decree handed down from above, or as something trapped entirely in an invisible spiritual realm. Instead, we began locating truth and freedom within human rationality itself. We started building rational states, ethical systems, and civic institutions that tried to reflect both our higher ideals and our earthly realities. This agonizing struggle essentially birthed the modern rational subject, which leaves us with a fascinating thread to pull on today. When you see modern debates erupting between deeply held personal conviction and the strict demands of objective evidence, you are quite literally watching the legacy of the Middle Ages unfold. This 1,000-year struggle to balance inner belief with external reality is hardwired right into our modern consciousness. It completely shapes how we argue about truth, science, and morality. So the real question is, as we navigate our own increasingly divided realities, how will we reconcile our own two worlds today?